This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension, we were debating the Appropriation Bill 2026. We return to the Appropriation Bill 2026.
We resume our standing Finance Committee. Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me congratulate the Ministry of Educational Transformation through my friend and Minister, Mr. Chad Blackman, for the work that you've done thus far in ensuring that our young people in this country receive what we think is the most valued and treasured aspect of their development, that's education. I specifically want to speak on schools, both plant and also speak on to the estimates, page 378, sub-program 283, children at risk. And I heard a member for the city, he asked a question and I heard a very good answer with respect to the fact that education and dealing with violence and children at risk is not only done within the schools. But I look at your sub-program and I see that last year your revised estimates were 1.173 million for that children at risk, and that relates to the Edna Nichols Center, that's what I think. And then I see this year your budgeted estimate of 1.081 million. But I want to get a little more in-depth information on statistics as it relates to students who've left secondary school without certification or equivalent qualifications within the past 2 to 3 years. Feel free to share with me and the public and for the public and also for the lower chamber here, those statistics, because they're very important as it relates to those questions that were posed with respect to deviance and how we treat with at-risk children. So I would like the statistics to support what you have articulated in a very meaningful way this morning.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The situation where some of our students across the country leaving school without certification is one that certainly causes me and the ministry concern. Because of course the implication of that is wide. One, with respect to being able to navigate life thereafter in a world where certification is needed, whether it be for a job and to move on in life or to enter into a higher institution of learning. Two, being able to say that I have achieved X or Y. And three, the result therefore many times, not always, but many times young persons who have not had the qualification that you would expect them to have, oftentimes end up going into that deviancy that you referred to. And therefore, one of the things that the ministry has been doing and will continue to do is to ensure that we can tighten the systems to make sure that they are, in many respects, being able to get the qualification. But part and parcel of that problem, if I step back, goes back to what we spoke about yesterday at length, the issue of literacy. And therefore, hence what we're now looking to do to ensure both medium-term, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, is to give these students the opportunity to be able to read and to write and to enumerate and to navigate the education system even beyond school. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to make sure that not only that we close the gap, but that we can help those who have also gone outside of the system. And that is why also, with respect to our sister ministry, the training will be key for those who have not been able to receive certification. But in terms of the raw data, I want to invite our chief to speak to the specific aspect of that.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Member, post-COVID, we have seen a decrease in the number of students leaving without certification. That number, or that percentage, went from 16% to 10%. I must say that the decrease that we are seeing, we believe, is linked to the interventions that we have been making with regard to ensuring that our students are exposed to technical and vocational subjects more and more. We have introduced also over the years more TVET areas for children to do, an alternative qualification or certification, the CVQs, City and Guilds. So we want to make sure that at the end of the basic education system, our children leave qualified. You heard over the past 2 days of us speak about the literacy program as well. We recognize that there are children at our secondary schools who can't read. And if they can't read, it means that they will not be able to pass the CXCs. So we're tackling that as well. So as Minister Chad Blackman said earlier, it is very multifaceted. We are trying to intervene at every level where we see a problem so that we can give our children the best opportunities when it comes to being successful after they have left school.
If I can also add to that, it is also one of the reasons why there's the revised curriculum, the transformation of the curriculum itself. Because as you go around to our schools, and even before I came into the ministry, a number of students have said, Honourable Member, that they always felt trapped in a curriculum or a system that doesn't cater necessarily to their skill sets and their interests. Yes, of course, there are foundational elements that every student must be able to navigate. Of course, English and mathematics, at least its basic core. But there are a lot of our young people who are incredibly creative. They're good at designs, they're good at fashion, they're good at music. And therefore, what you're now going to see in that rollout of the modernization of the curriculum, yes, in many respects, is still the traditional core areas that we've been accustomed to, but now placing even greater emphasis on the new areas of study so as to tap into that potential that these young people have. Because learning is not only, as you heard yesterday in my introduction, and my team reiterated it, it is not just only to focus on the traditional forms of academics. It is about helping them to navigate life, but giving them the skills to do so. So in fashion, in music, in the arts. You have, for example, the expansion now of the woodwork programs and the metalwork programs, so as to now capture the skill set that they are interested in, but towards ensuring that they can do so in an industrialized way, giving them the best tools and everything. So that is the approach that we've been taking. And when you look, therefore, for example, at the Barbados National Secondary Diploma, it will also focus on issues of numeracy, literacy, community service, of course, and a foreign language, so that our children are now then able to leave school with a certification that will allow for them to move beyond school. And therefore, that premise of what we teach and how we teach it is so critical to your question in helping to close that gap and to give every child the best possible chance of success during school and thereafter.
Thank you, Minister and team. Just as a comment to what was said, we saw the numbers move from 16% to 10%. And I heard the member for the city mention not seeking to diminish or disagree with anything that was said this morning, because I think the chief articulated the reasons for not having many more Edna Nichols centers and everything, what you're doing. But there's some out there who would argue, while those numbers are dropping from 16 to 10%, we're still seeing more on the 16 being held with guns and being charged in this country. I once held that portfolio that, remember, for St. John. Well, no, I think it has gone to the Prime Minister's office now with youth, where we looked at recidivism and the enrollment, the incarcerated, those who are incarcerated, and the under 35s and the under 25s, those numbers were very high. So while it's not only your responsibility, it's a holistic approach to solving these problems. Some will look to judge and say, hey, listen, look, those numbers have dropped from 16 to 10% of persons who are leaving school, secondary school without certification. But look at the numbers that are increasing with those who are leaving school and those who are at school that are being charged the age 15s, age 16s. All right, I just wanted to make that known so that when you are articulating to the public that, as the member for St. Michael South said, we need to let the country know more what we are doing as a Ministry of Educational Transformation, and indeed it is wonderful work. But I move on, Mr. Chair, if you give me the little latitude, because this is my first time in the program. I moved to another school, and I want to ask a parochial question to the member, the project manager at the St. Luke's Brighton School.
Honourable member, you have to pose the question to the minister. The minister.
Yes, Minister, sorry. Probably because I know him so well, I was being too informal. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, question relates to the St. Luke's Brighton plant. Over the years, we've seen, over the past 3 to 4 years, if I stand corrected by the member, the Chief Education Officer for that area, but we've seen students, teachers leave the plant at St. Luke's Brighton on, I think, 3 occasions over the past 4 years, or 2 occasions over the past 3 years. Leave the plant, they go to the Draxar Resource Center, the Allerton Community Center, spend 6 months or 3 months, then they're back in the plant. And as recent as last year, they were out of the plant again and back to the Draxar Resource Center and the Allerton Community Center. And now they are back in the plant again. And as a technical person, it begs me to ask the question, is there a fundamental problem that needs to be addressed at that school? And if so, I would like, through you, Minister, to let me and also the people of St. George South know what are the challenges with the school. Because the parents, up to last night, I got a call from a parent, asked the question about St. Luke's Brighton Primary School. So just to share with the public, because this, the well of Parliament, as the Prime Minister would say, is not only for us in Parliament, but is for the public to know what is going on. And I know you have the answer, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let me assure you and the good people of St. George South, and by extension the country, things at this school are now settled. I want to go on record as saying they're now settled. And not only do we have, of course, a spanking facility, but both on the pedagogical side and the quality of our infrastructure, both staff and students are comfortable. But at the same time, we are not going to rest on our laurels, and the ministry has a very deliberate strategy in ensuring that schools that historically, whether that be within the last year or two or even before, that have presented issues, we are paying keen attention through our technical management unit in the ministry to ensure that we are monitoring things at the school, so as to ensure that we're on the preventative side and not on the reactive side. But I want to invite Mr. Baker, who heads the ETMU, to take the floor.
Thank you, Minister. In response to the question at St. Luke's Brighton, as the PS has indicated before, we are no longer looking at piecemeal repairs. We are doing intensive work. So what would have happened on the last occasion when the staff and students who left the school, we undertook significant refurbishments at the school. And these would have included the upgrading of the principal's office, the staff room, bathrooms, the hall and classrooms were redecorated, external walls redecorated as well. The classroom floors were tiled, epoxy was applied to the hall floor. The nutrition room was completely refurbished. So we spent a lot of time and effort and money upgrading the facility. I think it might have suffered from a lack of maintenance before, and that would have been the problem. So I can tell you now that based on the work that has been undertaken, the student staff are there for the long haul. There's no reason for them to have to move again.
So I can rightfully say that there's no issue at St. Luke's Brighton with respect to the graveyard and the school proximity to the graveyard.
Correct.
Okay, thank
Correct.
you. All right, my final question relates to St. Jude's Primary now. And while St. Jude's Primary is situated in the north, and my colleague for the north, I still have a vested interest because we can debate, it's just across the road, but I have more students from the south going to St. Jude's than from the north. But the plant is not in a very good state. And I visit the school, both of us, we visit the school pretty often. We are involved actively with that school, and I want to know what are the plans for that school. I heard through you, Miss Minister Blackman, I heard it mentioned yesterday that is part of one of the programs to be upgraded. But I would like, again, for the public and those persons who are listening, to know what are the plans you have for St. Jude's Primary School.
Thank you, Honourable Member. So yes, that is part of one of the schools being done through the IDB project, the Skills for the Future, to ensure that we can modernize the school, make it attractive, make it clean, make it safe for all of the persons there and teachers and students. Now, therefore, work will be done this year so as to ensure that we bring it to that quality for the students and teachers. But I also want to invite Mr. Baker again to give you some more specifics so as to treat to your query.
Thank you, Minister. The St. Jude's Primary School forms part of the Skills for the Future project, which is funded by the IDB, and it will result, like our other schools, in improvement to facilities for the students and staff, exclusive of special education needs classroom, solar lighting, blinds for windows, zonal fans, padded corners, upgraded bathrooms, security, and ancillary facilities. So it will look completely different, again, when they return to the school. And any part of the school that is not addressed under the Skills for the Future project will be captured by the work of the Education Technical Management Unit. So when the students and staff return, it will be a completely upgraded facility as well.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, based on the response, I just want to ask a follow-up question, because the plant is a small plant. I should say a compact plant, not small, a compact plant. And you don't have much area for the students to play. They have to travel to greens. That's about, say, 3/4 of a mile to engage in recreational activity. Yes, you can stay on the hard court, but that's not all you want to do at St. Jude's. There's some lands, and I will want you, through you, Mr. Minister, to see how you can acquire some of the lands. I think this is property of the Crown, National Housing Corporation, to give those young children, aspiring politicians, aspiring sportsmen, the opportunity to play. And that is something I would want you to look into, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I give you and the good people of that community the assurance that my ministry will certainly be speaking to the Ministry of Housing, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West, so as to ensure that we can explore what is possible for the benefit of all concerned.
Thank you very much, and continue the good work, you and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the Minister and also the team at the Ministry of Education Transformation. My question is related to sub-program 307, which is the New Horizons Academy. I heard Dr. Archer Bradshaw allude to this facility earlier, but I want to seek further clarification. Now, the estimates indicate an increase of maybe over 400,000 or so over the last financial year in terms of the funds allocated to the academy. My understanding is that the New Horizons Academy caters to children with more serious issues than that of the Edna Nichols school, and therefore they may require additional support, more specialized support. But what I want to ask is, what is the main difference between the two facilities, and what is the plan not only to deal with these students, but also to protect the teachers who may be having some challenges who work at this facility?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I want to invite Ms. Kay Sargent to take the floor.
Honourable Member, my name is Kay Sargent, Senior Education Officer. Could you repeat the first part of your question? It was quite low there just now.
Okay, so I want to seek clarification on the main difference between the two facilities, which is the New Horizons Academy and the Edna Nichols School, and also what plans are in place to not only deal with the students, but to protect the teachers who work at these facilities.
Thank you. The Edna Nichols Center is what we call or refer to as an out-of-school suspension program. It is not a day school. Students who are suspended from secondary schools are referred there. The objective of that school really is to ensure that students who are out of school during their suspension have a place to go to keep them off the streets. There at that program, we address areas on which are dealt with in order to modify the behavior. For example, at the Edna Nichols Center, you would have counselors engaging in areas of conflict resolution, self-esteem, peer pressure, family planning, drug education programs, relationships and feelings. They can only attend the Edna Nichols Center for 10 days at a time. At that center, they will also be assessed. Students are referred for psychological evaluation or any of the other agencies which the team at the Edna Nichols Center deem would help the child. They work closely with the parents. They also feed back information to the secondary school once the children return back to school. So that's the Edna Nichols Center. It is an out-of-school suspension program. The New Horizons Academy is a school. It is a school for students with social-emotional difficulties who have been referred there from their secondary school. We begin, students can attend there from ages 11 and up, and they're referred there for students who are having significant challenges taking advantage of their secondary education. Students who go to the New Horizons Academy don't have to go there for the remainder of their secondary life. Once interventions are put in place and they see some results, meaning changing in behavior, they do have the opportunity to return back to the secondary school or another secondary school should they see fit. Now, the student population, I would report to you, over the last couple of years, we have seen a slight change in the profile of that student. Now, that school, I believe, is now in its 11th or 12th year, and over time, we have seen a different type of child attending New Horizons Academy. The same measures that we engage in terms of staff safety at the school, we do also engage in at New Horizons. So there are security measures that we have in place. There are times that students can get physically aggressive. We do engage in training of the teachers where they can best know how to de-escalate situations. And so there have been in recent times some concerns about issues like that. And through training, through protocols at the school, we are working to minimize the risk to members of staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I asked the question because I have been getting some feedback from my constituents about the need for additional reinforcement at the school. So my question, in light of the increase in the estimates, was specifically to ask if there would be a plan for additional reinforcements to protect teachers at the school. So perhaps you can shed some light on that, teachers and staff at the school.
Yes, thank you for the question. Definitely, we understand that teachers at these two institutions are operating in very risky environments. And so to ensure that they're comfortable to perform their functions, we would engage with them to determine specifically their needs in terms of making them feel as safe as possible. Right? But I will add here that we are very grateful, though, for the support from external agencies, because that support allows us to intervene in ways that the Ministry of Education Transformation could not intervene on its own. We have relationships with the Drug Education and Counseling, what we call DECs, the Probation Department, NCSA, the Youth Advanced Corps, the Juvenile Liaison Scheme, the Barbados Family Planning Association. So while these children who are at risk go to the New Horizons or go to Edna Nichols, we have those supporting agencies lending assistance. We are also seeking to build out a program with the Barbados Defense Force across both of these institutions, because we recognize that discipline is something that we need to pay more attention to. We want our children, yes, we recognize, yes, some of them might be on drugs, some of them might be dealing with certain psychosocial challenges, but there's a need for them to understand time and place, you know, how to behave, how to keep themselves clean, because some of them are not being taught these things at home at all. Yes? So to your question, we will definitely be talking with the teachers and other support staff at these two institutions to see how we can make their spaces as safe and as comfortable as possible. Thank you.
On that point also, Honourable Member, I also want to give you and the country the assurance, amongst many other schools, of course, but that is one of the schools on my list of touring. And actually not just seeing the plant, but seeing the operations and any concerns that teachers, for example, may have. Because as the Chief rightly said, safety is paramount. And we have made it very clear that our teachers across our institutions must be able to do their job that the country asks them to do in a safe environment and not having to feel in any way uncomfortable. So I want to give you and the country that assurance, taking a very practical approach and hands-on to see the operations and to see how things can be improved where necessary.
So thank you, Minister and Dr. Bradshaw as well, for your response. And my only admonition would be to hasten because it's an urgent situation, we want to continue to ensure the safety of our teachers and support staff at these various institutions. Thank you.
Honorable members, we want to wrap up this head. However, we have some honorable members that will have some further questions. We'll be asking you that we will give you the opportunity to do so, and we want you to be very crisp because we would want to close off this head prior to going to lunch. I will give you that opportunity in this order. Honorable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair. A quick question. It is to do with the fact that, we've established that the birth rates are falling, numbers of children going into school falling, and the reality of the extent of the plant that exists. I'm asking this kinda as one of the MPs from the northern portion of the country. We have a lot of plant and small numbers of students. My question is, and like I said, I'm asking the question based on an assumption. That assumption is that the ministry would want children to be going to school close to where they live. What is the ministry's view or its intent in terms of trying to achieve that objective? That is, not having children from Pike Corner, for example, only wanting to go to Charles F. Broome or even All Saints. Is there anything in the ministry's plans? I know it can't be done by the ministry alone because these are multifaceted types of decisions that people make, but is there anything that the ministry is thinking about to address that matter so that more children go to the school in St. Clement's, Ignatius Bayer, Half Moon Fort in my constituency, Elliott Belgrave, as examples, rather than putting pressure on the transportation system, putting pressure on schools in St. Michael, where maybe their parents go to work.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The issue is one that certainly is receiving our focus and attention. And as a matter of fact, the issue of not just the allocation and role and number, and of course, persons choosing to go to schools well outside of their area has to be looked at. But we must also ask, how do we now ensure that we raise the standard of all of our schools to the point where a school outside of your area, particularly at the primary level, is not just seen as a school of choice, but all schools have that standard that gives that assurance. But I want to invite Deputy Education Officer Scott to walk you through what are the considerations before the ministry at this point in time to treat to the issue that you've raised.
Thank you, Minister. Stephen Scott, Deputy Chief Education Officer acting for Planning and Development. In terms of encouraging the students to be at those schools in those areas, one, as we proceed to the continuous assessment process, we do have the plan in place that we are going to encourage students and parents who would prefer to be within their particular area to make choices of those schools so that those students can be close to the area where they live. I do know that there are the secondary schools within those areas as well, who also look to have such students from those areas visiting the primary schools to encourage the choice of the secondary school in the area, and it makes better, as you said, for the transportation, so that we do not have the bottleneck in terms of coming to town or other areas, so that we have those children in that area. We are reviewing, looking at how we can upgrade those schools to ensure that what is offered there would be attractive to those students and the parents within that area. And we're also looking at the care, offering that care for students before school and after school, so that parents who may work in another area, they can be confident that the students would be safe and secure in terms of being at the schools, should they go off to work, and then they can return to collect them safely. So we are reviewing all of the schools and looking to put those programs in place to ensure that that occurs.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll ask one question, and if the response is fulsome, I would not need any follow-up. Minister, I came across an interview that was done by the CEO of a 600 billion AI company. It was an interview with the CEO, and one of the things that they noted about this particular CEO, that she didn't study engineering, she didn't study sciences, she studied humanities, of all things. And what the article was looking at was the fact that as we move to this notion of AI, digital technology, etc., that the workplace is actually looking for skills that keep us more human. Even as AI replaces, all of those other technical skills, the article was suggesting, again, that there is a trend at the level of CEO and those that are leading, not to necessarily reflect the skills that we would assume that they need in order to progress. And it was a cause for reflection. And I want to ask this question: how many students do we have that are still taking CXCs in the areas of humanities, which would cover history, geography, English literature, the arts, those subjects that for many of us now, and I heard it certainly when I was going to school, they don't lead anywhere apparently at that particular time. Humanities and, English literature, what we need English literature for? There's no jobs in English literature. How many students do we actually have still taking those? For me, what are the core subjects that teach us about human nuances, etc.?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'd invite the team to treat to the issue of the numbers, but I want to preface their response with the fact, and you are right, the world now requires, particularly in the context of jobs and business, persons who are also minded to solve human problems, creating solutions for human problems. And whether you have a business or you're part of a team, it is really about ensuring how do you create systems, how do you create solutions that will help humanity to advance and to have a better quality of life. And therefore, what you're also now seeing through education models around the world is to give that skill set. Because the truth is, technology is there to be an enabler and not to be the solution itself. It is there to amplify whatever solution comes before you. But it also treats to the issue with respect to what you mentioned, that they're now looking for persons, or they're preferring persons who have a skill set more focusing on humanity, where we focus on the value system that we're now integrating through the education system. And therefore, of course, the skills and the attitudes, the values and excellence. And once you can give our students that perspective, of understanding how do I interface with my fellow man? How do I have and embrace the value of empathy? It is something and a skill set that, in my view, notwithstanding the qualifications and certifications in other areas, it is the skill set that will be necessary to navigate the next 40, 50 years of our development. But I want to invite our team, Stephen Scott, Reverend Scott, to treat to the issue, particularly with respect to the percentage and portion of our students focusing on the humanities. And final to say, the traditional thinking and model, you are right, is that if you're going to do English literature or any other area, there's no job in that. But to my mind, the value must not just be about the job that you can get in those areas, but how do you now pivot and use those subject areas to help us to look at the broader picture of how do we serve our fellow man through development, looking at it through a level of empathy, in areas of accessibility, inclusion, those key things that will help the country to move forward, particularly on the social development side, and not just on the productive sector side.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, in terms of the entries in the humanities subjects 2025 for CSEC, in Caribbean history, we had 433 students completing that subject. For English literature, we had 1,308 students completing that subject at CSEC 2025. For French, we had 362 students entered for that subject. For music, we had music general, we had 131 students entered. Geography, we had 800 students entered for geography. And I'm just going on to Spanish, we had 806 students entered. Social studies, 1,255 students entered. Theater arts, we had 157 students entered. Visual arts, 358 students entered for CSEC during the 2025 period. So we do have students entered for the humanities. It would not necessarily be at the level that we would want. And of course, in the new curriculum that we're looking at, we are looking at the orange economy. And therefore, that is going to be added to the new subjects in the curriculum as we roll that out in September 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
We'll be brief. Minister, I must commend you and your team for a most thorough overview of the plans for this year. I just want to raise one thing. Is, I guess, following the highly publicized survey that was done some time ago, there seemed to have been a reluctance of the Ministry of Education in embarking upon any surveys at all. And that has crippled a number of critical surveys, and this comes in following the issue raised by the member for St. Michael Central and some other persons in relation to drugs in school and whatnot. The NCSA is accustomed doing a survey to inform its policies in relation to drug treatment and early warning systems, so they can detect new and emerging drugs that are in use in Barbados. They have hit a sticking point with the Ministry of Education since the other survey that I spoke about. For obvious reasons, I'm just not going to call the name of it, but you know what I'm talking about. While I note the reluctance, there are some institutions that depend on the feedback to be able to design programs for the said same students that fall under your remit. And I guess it is easy for you all to manage the content of those surveys, but is there going to be a change this year to allow the other governmental institutions and organizations to properly work with the Ministry of Education to get the information to you that may end up saving the lives of the same persons who are within your charge?
No, thank you, AG, for that. I want to assure you and the public of the broader public interest of ensuring that, as you said, the necessary information that will be used to help the system through the interventions, we will ensure that that is done. Of course, subject to the necessary frameworks and protocols, strictest frameworks and protocols, to first of all ensure the safety of our children, and to ensure that they're not put in any way that is jeopardized or causing harm, physical, mental, anything. But two, at the same time, balancing that with getting the content that is necessary to create and craft the necessary interventions. Because, as you would appreciate, without the relevant data, without the relevant information, we can't make well-informed interventions and strategies. So therefore, striking that balance whilst adhering to the strictest framework, which the chief, of course, has assured me, is also not just implemented, but being continued to be monitored so that we can have that buffer going forward is key. But I just want to invite the chief just to very briefly speak to where we're at with that regard.
Thank you, Minister. With regard to research, the ministry has established very clear protocols. We have created an education research committee comprising experts in research from within the Ministry of Education. If a person wants to conduct research using a survey instrument, that survey instrument is screened by the experts within the Ministry of Education through that Education Research Committee. Permission is then granted, and then the person therefore has to go to the principal and receive permission also. So the principal, there are several levels. The principal will also screen, or the principal and his or her team will screen. These protocols were not in place before because we took it for granted that persons will be ethical and that the instruments that were approved by the ministry or that are approved by the ministry will be used within the school. We can no longer take that for granted. So this is the reason we have this tiered approach. We recognize that there are some persons conducting research who may want to go directly to the school to conduct research. That will no longer be allowed. All research, all intention of doing research must come through the Ministry of Education transformation in order for it to be screened to ensure that the instruments that are being used, those surveys or observation schedules, whatever it is, those instruments that are being used will not cause any harm to our children. Another consideration is the Data Protection Act, and we had several meetings with the Data Protection Commissioner, and it has been made clear that there are certain types of information that will require parental consent. And we are able to screen those instruments to determine which ones will require parental consent. And we will give a letter to the person conducting the research to say that parental consent here is required before you can collect any data. And that letter, of course, has to be shown to the principal. So there are a number of protocols that we have put in place to ensure that we don't have a repeat of what occurred in 2022.
So I understand you entirely, and that's the theory of it. But the practical thing is that since then up to now, the National Council on Substance Abuse has been unable to get into the schools at any level or any school in order to conduct its research. And quite frankly, they need to know from the children Are you using drugs? What drugs are you using? This is not to call out a child, but this is so we know what is there and what programs can be specifically designed to address persons of the school age. So I hear you with the protocols, and I understand you have to put your protocols in place, but it must not be protocols that end up with a net result of 0 surveys, right? So I just want you to bear that in mind, that some are critical of immediate attention and swift action. That's, I will tackle this in association with the Minister for Home Affairs otherwise, but I just want to be assured that in your plans for this year, it contemplates the reintroductions of some things that were brought to a halt. That's all.
Well, I thank you for your comment. What I will encourage you persons from the NCSA to do is to have a discussion. Well, you have to follow the protocols. The protocols are there to be followed. We can't overstep. So have a conversation with the Ministry of Education Transformation and let us see what can be done so that they can collect the data that is required. But we must follow the protocols as set out, and we must be very aligned with the Data Protection Act. We cannot overstep those. So once they do that, once the NCSA does that, then we wouldn't have an issue at all.
I'm comfortable that I brought it to your attention.
Thank you very much, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one before we go to the break. I'm concerned with the level of truancy that I'm seeing in Barbados. When we were going to school, it was almost infrequent for students to be seen at bus stops on the road after 9 o'clock. So I want to know how far advanced are we with the dedicated school bus service? There are children within the constituency that I happen to represent who have to get up at 5 o'clock on mornings to leave areas like Canefield and Erie Court. And then they don't get back home until after 7 or 8 o'clock because of the current bus service. And I know that the plans from the ministry that have been announced before were designed to alleviate those problems. But there's too much children on our streets at 9:30 and 10 o'clock on mornings at bus stops. They cannot be getting the instruction and the tuition that the schools are providing and the guidance that the schools are providing if they're at bus stops after 9 and 10 o'clock. It is a big problem and it needs to be addressed. So I want to hear from the ministry officials as to what plans they have in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. With regard to the dedicated school bus service, I'm happy to say that we have been in talks with Linda Holder, Transport Board, how we could get children to school on time. Over the past 3 years, we've had certain issues in certain places. That is, some children not getting buses on certain routes. But the relationship between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Transport and the Transport Board is such that once it is brought to their attention, they will seek to remedy. So we are at an advanced stage when it comes to the creation of a dedicated school bus service. We conducted a survey quite recently to determine those routes where children have issues. And we have shared those with Linda Holder from the Transport Board. So you'll be seeing that pretty soon in terms of the dedicated school bus service. I will now invite Sharon Weeks-Cumberbatch, who is the Senior School Attendance Officer, to speak about the truancy rates.
Good afternoon. Sharon Weeks, Cumberbatch, Senior School Attendance Officer. Can you repeat the question for me, Honourable Minister?
Just concerned about the high level of truancy that we're seeing in Barbados, especially the children at bus stops waiting long after 9 and 10 o'clock at morning, still on the way to school.
Well, within the School Attendance Department, we currently have an arrangement with the, within the School Attendance Department, we currently have an arrangement with the Barbados Police Service with the intervention of a joint venture patrol, where every morning we are seen on the roads to assist in terms of those children who are seen loitering or truancy. We seek to ensure that those children are moved from on the road. Once we get the calls, and we then take ourselves to the places where those students are, because there are some hot spots where you will see more children than other areas. So our patrol would target those areas, and we would go and ensure that those students are moved from that area. We put those children inside of the vehicle as well. We are working with the Transport Board because we recognize too that there are some challenges within the terminal with the service. Once those services are available, the students are expected to go on the buses to get to school. But sometimes we have challenges where students would leave the terminal once the service is available, and then they return after the service has gone. Then we have children, that would lead to children being on the road where you will see them like 10 o'clock or later. There's only one officer who is positioned in that terminal. One is in Princess Alice and one would be in Granville Williams terminal. And the challenge is that the children come in different time groups. We say that they come in for different shifts. So when there's a 9 o'clock service, we will see like 5, 10 children there for that service. After that service has gone, we will see a drove of 20 children just come into the terminal just like that. And then we obviously have to communicate with transport, the supervisor on the job at the time, to ensure that we get a bus to move those children out. But outside of the terminal, then the joint venture patrol will assist in moving those children from the spots once reported to us. If we cannot get to those areas, I said we work with the Barbados Police Service, so the patrols that are on the road, we will communicate with them so that they can assist us in that regard as well.
Just to follow up though, but the problem is a little more chronic than that. And I understand that you have a limited amount of officers doing that role. But I mean, you can pass, say for example, Leicester, one secondary school, and see the teacher or the security guard with the late book, and 50 people in a line at 9:45 or 10 o'clock. They're not getting to school at 10 o'clock.
The factors are a lot. Students first have to get from where they live to the terminal or which other point so that they can get transport. And then from there, they have to get to school. And going into school now, there are some instances where students stop to get breakfast. So obviously, if they are taking breakfast, which is close to the school, then we have conversations, we try to have conversations with those proprietors in terms of the children coming at the time and telling them, well, it is time for the students to be at school. You have to help us to get these children into school. And then when they come to the school now, they have to get in a line, and then obviously there's a search going on, which obviously adds to the time, the lateness and everything in terms of the children getting into school. So it is not just one factor, it's a ripple effect happening with these students.
The challenge might be more cultural because, as I said, we never got to school late, or it wasn't at the level that is. So we have either become more lax or it's more tolerable now. I know there's a transportation system, but back in the days, you went to school where you were allocated on the marks you went. So my brother, we left St. Thomas and he went to Cordian Park. He took but people got to school early back then. So it is a bigger challenge now, and I think that you have to address your minds to it in a much different way.
It is cultural because some of the trends that we see every morning, it is a lot to deal with. Our children are engaging in practices that are not healthy on mornings, like with the drugs and all the different things in places. And again, we are working towards getting additional resources relative to officers because it would just be one officer in that particular spot. And we have to work then with the other officers from maybe transport board to assist us in helping to move those children. Even the citizens themselves would assist us in helping to move those children. But yes, the culture is very endemic, and that is a problem that we get every single morning.
All right, Chair, through you, in here as well, if you don't mind. Right, so we also have to think about accountability. Sometimes when you see children getting to school late, it has nothing to do with the school bus. It has to do sometimes with the fact that some children just feel that they can do whatever they want to. So we have to be able to hold parents accountable and children accountable as well. You spoke about when you were going to school, you used to get to school early, but I'm sure you had a parent that you know that if you got to school late, it's problems. You will be in trouble. You see? So what I'm saying here is I'm just reinforcing the 6th point that Minister made yesterday. He spoke about accountability, and we need to hold our parents accountable and the students themselves accountable. As part of the education transformation agenda, we spoke about making changes to the curriculum as well, to make learning more enjoyable, more relevant. Children can see the connections and so on. And we believe that once we're able to do that, children will be more interested in getting to school on time. We also spoke about social and emotional learning, and that being a thread that we are weaving through our curriculum. We want our children to be able to self-regulate, right? They have to know about, look, I want to get to school for 8:15, so it means that I cannot get up at 8:15, or I can't get up at 8 o'clock. I have to get up at 6 or 5:30 and start to prepare. These are the kinds of values, the kinds of attitudes that we want our students to have. But accountability is a very big part of it, and while we are responsible for the education system, we are very aware that children form part of a community, form part of a society. It just so happens that between 5 and 16, they're in school. And I also want to reiterate the fact that school is indeed a microcosm of society. It is a microcosm of society. So some of the ills that we see in society, we see playing out in schools. And while we will attempt to remedy the problems that we are seeing within the schools, we still have to hold everybody else accountable. It takes a village to raise a child. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South, we will have, this is the last member before I raise my question. Then, Minister, we will come back to you to wrap up before we take a break.
All right, thanks, Chair. This will be very quick. I noticed in the estimates, as I spoke yesterday, a lot of money is allocated to restructuring and fixing schools for infrastructure. What that means is that the students are sometimes displaced from one school to another. In my constituency, the students from Wilkie Cumberbatch are now at Bay Primary, or they are. And what I found when I visited the school and when I spoke to some of the teachers and some of the children is that we make provisions for the children to go there physically, but there's really no integration. I don't know how much thought is given toward integration because the children eat at a different time. They play at a different time, or they play in a different space. You get to go at a different time. And I'm just wondering, because I can see that there's going to be a lot of this displacement going forward, is there like a change management person who manages this area? Is there a standard to make sure that the children don't feel as if, obviously I'm from the Pine, I went to Wilkie Cumberbatch Primary, I have a vested interest in that school, but I represent Bay Primary, I have a vested interest in that school, and I'm sure, Minister, you have a vested interest in all these schools. So I'm just trying to figure out what are the plans and the policies when those things occur, because at Bay Primary, there are definitely two separate things happening there at the same time. I'm not so sure that's fair to the students.
No, thank you, Minister. What has to happen, certainly, because we can't have two tiers, has to be full integration. But I want to invite our Deputy Chief Education Officer Beckles to treat to the issue.
Deputy Chief Education Officer Julia Beckles. Thank you, Minister. What we did say to our parents when we relocated the schools was that as far as possible, we wanted to retain the integrity of the school that had been relocated, because that was a concern for the parents and guardians of the Wilkie Cumberbatch School. Their concern was, while we are going to be in Bay Primary, Luther Thorne, and we are going to be in Gradley Prescott, are we still going to be Wilkie Cumberbatch School? And we did our best to reassure them that that was indeed the point. However, we did say that the principals at their level could determine what they wanted to do together. And there have been some activities that they have done together. There have been some. But we left that up to them. And I do know, I'm not sure I know about what you speak, but I am sure that they have done some things together. As it relates to perhaps having the lunch at separate times, that had to do with the numbers and ensuring that they were able to cater to the students within the time that was allotted for lunch. But there are some things that they have done together. I do know that, for instance, assembly, sometimes they have had assemblies together. But again, we were very, very careful to treat to the whole issue of the school still being, having its own identity, because that was very concerning for parents and teachers of Wilkie Cumberbatch.
Chair, just to follow up, I understand that, but children do not respect these artificial lines. And I'm saying to you that at Bay Primary, this was raised with me by people from the school, that they had a profound concern that the children who came from Wilkie Cumberbatch are almost treated in a way like second-class citizens. Because obviously this is a dominant school. And then some of the persons who work there also expressed to me that the children would say, we don't play with them because they're Wilkie Cumberbatch children, or they don't play because they're primary. I'm just saying you have to give you can't bring two schools together. Children will play, children will mesh. So my question wasn't really to whether there were a few points where they came into contact, is what are the standards and the policies to ensure when you bring students from one school to another school, you not only respect the integrity of the school that is coming or the school that exists, but that you find a way to ensure that when they do come, the children get to perhaps even benefit from their experience, but that it doesn't feel like there are two separate streams of children. You understand? It is more like and the way this was raised with me on several occasions, I must tell you, this has been raised with me on several occasions, where persons were concerned just about the difference, so they have to go in different lanes, they really do not have any large interaction. But my question is a policy and a standard, because in the estimates I see so much, which is a good thing, so many schools are to be repaired. Do I imagine that this is going to happen to other schools?
Senior Minister, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. We will look to see how we can smooth this out, because we don't want any of our children or teachers to feel like second-class citizens. So I thank you very much for bringing that to our attention, and we will address it.
Honourable Member for St. James North, Minister, you can wrap up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me start by, first of all, thanking all honourable members of this chamber who over the course of the last day and a half have not just, of course, listened to my team and I present on our program for estimates in the year coming, but have asked the necessary questions that have allowed for us to share the vision for this year. And I want to reiterate the fact that those 6 priorities that I would have mentioned to the country yesterday, that we are committed to work in earnest so as to deliver on transformation of education in Barbados. As I've said before, yes, of course, this is the estimates exercise, but this is also about ensuring that we can deliver world-class education for every Barbadian household, every mother, every father, every child, every grandmother, every godparent, so as to ensure that they can, 1, have the skills necessary to be able to maximize their education, 2, to be able to read, write, compute, but 3 and 4thly, to be able to go anywhere in the world and to command the respect through that Barbadian values. And then lastly, to be able to do so with pride, bringing Barbados to the level that we can be proud of, helping us to develop and meet our targets of national development. And I want to give this Parliament, first of all, the commitment that our team and I will leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of delivering this mandate of the transformation of education. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, thank all honourable members for your time, your questions, and the rich engagement that has been estimates with respect to education transformation over yesterday and today. Thank you very much. And I beg to move that the head now stand par.
The question is that this head no stand par. All honourable members in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:45 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:45 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 2:45 p.m.